Hello and welcome to this edition of Secure Networks, the Endace Packet Forensic Files, with your host, Michael Morris. This week's very special guest is Ryan Coe, Chair and Director of Cybersecurity at the University of Queensland. Ryan, welcome. Thank you for joining. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Thanks, Michael. It's a privilege to be on this call or this recording. I'm a professor at the University of Queensland, as you mentioned, and previously I was at a university in New Zealand, which is the University of Waikato, which was also the birthplace of Endace.
Yes.
And so, and then before that I was in HP Labs in a kind of industry research role.
Okay.
And prior to that, I was an engineer. So I was an engineer, I retrained in PhD, and then I got onto the research and then the academic route.
Excellent. No, we're really glad to have you. And obviously, yes, you're have connections to some of our roots and our heritage. So we certainly, again, thank you for joining. Ryan, you've been a founder and contributor to developing the CCSP certification, and you've developed research master's degrees and postgraduate programs in the area of cybersecurity. What are some of the fundamental or foundational skills any security analyst must have to be successful in today's cyber challenged world?
Yeah, I think the first thing is probably we are starting to see an increasing awareness of the interdisciplinary aspects of cybersecurity, and also the threats that we face have implications not just on the technical, the setup of the computers or the systems around it, but also implications for business, for the way we handle crime, or even geopolitics. So many different aspects to think about, if you're a cybersecurity expert. So as you mentioned, I have designed a few curriculum, from master's degrees to national curriculum for New Zealand, for example, in the level 6 diploma, and also in the certified cloud security professional. I was privileged to be part of the team that started the first common body of knowledge. And over the years, I've seen the evolution of the curriculum being changed increasingly. From just a technical focus to having more communication skills, to having more business skills, and then ultimately to nowadays in my current degree that we have designed in the Master of Cybersecurity at UQ, University of Queensland, we included also not just the business leadership aspects, but also criminology aspects, understanding it from a criminal lens rather than just an exercise of patching and matching those things, because that's the way it works in reality. So we have to face up to it. I think the other aspect of the skills that people would need to have is an appreciation of the criminal mindset that the people they are up against usually they don't have any rules of engagement and have no boundaries. So whereas in the corporate and enterprise space, we have certain guidelines, governance, and best practices. So two different worlds. So you just have to be very open-minded.
No, that's an incredible mindset to take into it, right? Of understanding people and nation state motives for some of the things they're doing. So that's one thing I found interesting in our preliminary discussion. At the University of Queensland, you've taken on an interdisciplinary approach involving 4 different faculties. Why don't you first tell us about those faculties, and why is having that cross-functional experience and knowledge so important? Obviously, tied to kind of what we were just talking about, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, the 4 faculties are basically the one that I'm based in, which is the engineering faculty, engineering, architecture, and IT faculty, which comprises of a number of schools as well. So I'm in the School of IT and Electrical Engineering. But to design such a course, we need experts from around the campus. We were privileged to be in the top 50 ranking of the universities around the world. So it was quite easy to actually go across campus and look for experts. So in the other faculties, we have the business economics and law faculty. which provides the expertise in these areas in cybersecurity. And then we also have the Faculty of Science, which has mathematics and physics inside. So we have curriculum which teaches not just traditional crypto, but also an appreciation of quantum computers and also post-quantum world as well. And then we also have the School of Social Science, which is in the Humanities, Arts, and Social Science faculty. So social science people would be able to bring in the criminology, anthropology, political science aspects as well. So having all these experts gives a very rich, expert-led kind of curriculum. And we also have lots of different kind of hands-on or workshop type of learning. And also we also have guest lecturers who are experts in movers and shakers who are our alumni. So it's really, really useful. Yeah.
No, that's tremendous. I think bringing together the different disciplines and segments can be a real game changer in trying to stay ahead. Because like you said in the previous question, threat actors don't operate necessarily by the same rules, right? So
right.
Having that context. So along those lines, a lot is changing in the cybersecurity landscape. What do you, as universities and recommend as for businesses, need to do to prepare security analysts to be able to keep up to date, stay current, and actually stay ahead of threat actors and these new attacks?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to recognize is that we need to be ready for the future. You need to create the future, and most of the ways to create a future is to do some research and innovation. So that's the exciting part about being in a university degree, which is if it's designed well, it has research components inside, which exposes you to the cutting edge of the technology. So you'll be able to think about, okay, how can I make this better? How do I address all those gaps that I'm actually witnessing right now? Is this technique good? Right. So a few examples of research actually impacting our world right now. For example, CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA, you get all when you go into the web forms, it will prove whether you're a human. So that came from academic research. Even NDAs came from academic research at the University of Waikato, for example, with the deck cards and so on. And then we also have, for example, the one-time password, the whole technique behind generating the one-time password, and many, many more, So the only way to change the cat and mouse kind of situation is to create a new game, right? So if they are playing chess, you create a new game of chess, and then it brings everybody back onto the level playing field again. Yeah. So I think that's an important part. Yeah.
No, that's great insight and some tremendous examples you highlighted there. So when you hear of new breaches and attacks, like the recent SolarWinds Sunburst supply chain attack, what do you think SecOps teams and analysts need to be doing better or differently to better secure environments and to thoroughly hunt through their infrastructures for risks like that or risks of a similar type?
Yeah, I think you need to have this mindset where you need to be very stringent with the software that you buy and integrate to or receive data from. So the more stringent you are in the beginning, the less exposures you would have. So there are many existing methods and best practices for auditing and verifying the security of software. Most of them are not adhered to or followed because the time pressures of making a project succeed, right? Can sometimes overtake some of the details, and the devil is there. So so that's the key thing. And I guess if you can think of an analogy, I would say it will be like an interview process. So if you're hiring someone, you probably want to be as stringent as possible to make sure you select the right candidate. So think of it as like hiring a good person is
Yeah.
getting a good supplier is also very important. If you hire in a very loose fashion, you will get somebody who might be a wild cannon and that kind of thing. So the same goes for supply chain. I think you have to do that. The other thing is, of course, to not just to make a good gate mindset, but to monitor. To the monitoring is quite important, because most of the supply chain situations is set and forget or buy and forget type of situation. So the monitoring is quite important, actually. Yeah.
No, that's well. First of all, I loved your example of the hiring process. I think that's a great way to think about evaluating tools and systems you put in your infrastructure. But along the monitoring, right? Let's go further into that. So, what critical tools or monitoring components do you think many SOC teams are missing to
Yeah.
look for and find these new, more complex threats?
I think many of the SOC teams now are mostly missing the concept of tracking provenance. Most of the SOC teams run into many different challenges with regards to attribution. Where did it come from? How do I report that this was not from the malicious insiders, or whether it's outsiders? The only way that crosses everything is in provenance. And provenance in the networks, for example, PCAP, or even some of the Endace products, just to monitor how the traffic has gone by. That's the absolute kind of the truth that you can observe, and usually people would miss that, the PCAP capture. And also tracing those things then can tell you a story about the higher level intent. And you marry that to some provenance tracking tools in the machines, for example, in the kernel space or the user space. When you have the combination of these tools together, the network and within the systems, you can trace across the systems, which are under your control, of course. And for example, you run a cloud environment, you'll be able to see, okay, what goes in and what comes out, who has touched it, and you could even, using some of the latest techniques to decipher or infer what went on. So I think that kind of provenance mindset is missing, because most of the SOC analysts would be quite reactionary, and they will look at events. They look at, okay, this is an event, that is an event, but they don't look at the story behind the events and how the data has changed over time, and how the software has behaved across different systems. Yeah.
Right. No, that's great insight. The context of where things come from in relationship to what else was happening in the environment at the time. I think that's great insights. And you hit on a little point there. How do you see new platforms and tools like automation and orchestration really helping SecOps organizations and playing into that contextualization you just referred to?
Yeah, so I think automation, we are only at the beginning of this journey.
Yes.
And most of the automation are, we're transforming from just rule-based detection automation to now playbooks. And now, there's talk about artificial intelligence techniques. All these things are important because they basically, keep up with the pace and the scale of the attacks. We are, for example, we are now facing, when I teach in my lecture, usually in the first lecture, I will just put out, this is the scale of the attacks that we are facing, which is 4 unique malware or threats every second, right? So since the beginning of this interview until now, we've got hundreds of new malware, and we haven't even trained a single cybersecurity expert. So we have to really find ways that we can, augment the human analyst with good tools that can free them up from the repetitive, mundane tasks, and then let them be able to strategize and think innovatively and in the research mindset. Yeah, I think that's important. Automation it's definitely the way to go. But I think we are seeing at the begin. We are still at the beginning of the very first stage, and then I think once the machine learning community knows how to do, for example, time series data sets, stream mining techniques really well, then we will move towards that next phase of even much better automation. So I think automation really plays a key role. Yeah.
No, I think you're spot on. I think we're absolutely just at the beginning, and it's what I see is it also kind of opening the doors to not only getting ahead, or shall we say caught up with that swarms of events that folks are dealing with, but also starting to move them into more advanced proactive things like threat hunting and activities like that, which many SOC teams, as you know, just aren't quite there yet, right? So no, that's tremendous. So Ryan, one of the things I really like to get insights from experts that we get to join us on this show is, looking forward 6 to 18 months, what do you recommend to our listeners, really one thing to look out for or to be thinking about as they're trying to, stay ahead of threat actors and really manage this shifting battle for cybersecurity?
I think in the next, because most of the threats come from not just outside, but also sometimes unintentionally insiders as well, or even as
Good
we
point.
recently saw also in the supply chain. Having great capabilities in enabling attribution would be key, because you will see more and more attacks, and then you face more and more issues with attribution, and it's very time-consuming activity. In my role working with, for example, previously the Interpol and others, I find that we all know that attribution is the number one problem, and it will stay. The key to attribution is probably to understand the provenance, as I mentioned earlier, what goes on, and how do we report that with very strong confidence that it is really what it is.
Right.
Because we don't want to misattribute as well. So I think the one thing that you should focus on, if you are running a SOC, or if you are doing system administration, you should try to think of ways that can empower the interpretation of the provenance of what happens in your networks and also in your systems, because that will really, really make your life easier in the long run. Yeah.
No, that's great insights, and really appreciate it. Ryan, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you've got an incredibly busy schedule. Thanks for joining and sharing your insights and how better to secure networks. We'd ask our listeners to tune in next time for another edition of the Endace Packet Forensic Files. For more information about Endace's network packet capture platform and our integration with our Fusion technology partners, please go to endace.com. Ryan, again, thanks for taking some time, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.